When I was 15 years old and had just started my junior year, I created my first Twitter account, one I eventually deleted because of this story. For some context, I didn't tell anyone my username, neither my family nor my friends, because I didn't have any. My profile picture was an avatar, so there were no photos of me, and for my location I put Paris since I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have many followers, maybe 20 or 30, and I didn't follow many people either, so my timeline wasn't very interesting. One evening in October, someone sent me a rather strange direct message. It was an account with around 200 followers, and the message said, "Hi, my name is Rob. I just turned 17 and wanted to know if you lived in Auxerre because I'll soon be moving there and going to the town high school, and I'm looking for friends." Auxerre was the town I lived in. I immediately thought something was wrong, because nowhere on my profile did I say where I actually lived. After thinking about it for a while, though, I remembered a tweet I'd made weeks earlier about buses where I mentioned the city. I told myself he probably searched for Auxerre and found my tweet. His age didn't seem shocking either, since I was 2 years ahead of my classmates. I was bored, and since he was polite, I replied. I told him I did indeed live in Auxerre and went to high school there. The conversation felt natural, and we talked a lot that night. Mostly about high school, cafeteria food, teachers, that kind of thing. But as it got very late, he started slipping in personal questions. Do you live far from the school? In a house or an apartment? Do you live with both your parents? There are 5 of you. You're not often home alone, right? I never answered those questions because they felt way too shady. Unfortunately, he didn't insist. Unfortunately, because if he had, I probably would have blocked him. The next day, it was the same thing. We talked a lot, and he kept asking personal questions to get to know me better. I asked him some questions too, and he always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer anything about my home, though. He didn't need to know. This went on for 2 or 3 weeks, which was enough for me to develop feelings for him. He was handsome, super kind, and it was everything I needed. I had been bullied for years, and even today I tend to develop strong feelings, and more importantly, blind trust, for people who are friendly to me. In France, we have a 2-week vacation in October. The day before school started again, he finally told me he would be coming to my high school because he had moved in with his mom. He asked me where we could meet during the morning break. I was so happy and relieved at the idea of finally meeting him, and I told him to meet me in the hall. When he realized there would be people around, he said he would prefer somewhere more isolated. He explained that he was afraid he wouldn't recognize me and didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It sounded like a good excuse to me, so I suggested the 3rd floor bathroom, since we weren't allowed to stay there during breaks and no one would disturb us. In my mind, even though it was a bit creepy, we would still be inside the school, so nothing bad could happen. The next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty and wore my best clothes. I counted down the minutes until the break. When it finally arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. When he showed up, it really was him. He wasn't a catfish. He looked a lot like his profile picture, though I noticed he seemed a bit older than he'd said, more like 20 than 17. We talked a lot and got along well, and I was thrilled. At the end of the break, he asked me to go to a fast food place with him for lunch. I said no because I didn't have any money, and I always refuse to let people pay for me. It's a principle. He seemed disappointed, but then offered to walk me home after classes. I explained that I had to take the bus, but that he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed again, but eventually accepted. That's exactly what happened, and it quickly became a routine. We met in the 3rd floor bathroom during the morning break, and he walked me to the bus stop after classes. One strange thing, I never saw him in the hallways or at the cafeteria. At the time, I told myself the building was huge, and there were over 1,500 students, so if our schedules didn't line up, it made sense we wouldn't run into each other. This went on until December, almost a month and a half. On Thursday, December 14th, I complained to him about how lonely I was going to be that evening. My dad was abroad for work, my brother was always at a friend's house, my little sister was on a school trip, and my mom had to work late that night. It was reckless of me, but after weeks I thought I could trust him. That evening he walked me to the bus stop. We waited together, I got on the bus, waved at him, and put my earphones in. I had 2 stops before my house. It was around 5:45 p.m., and in December it was already very dark. When I got off the bus, I had a really bad feeling, an uncomfortable knot in my stomach like I was being watched. I paused my music but kept my earphones on so people would think I couldn't hear anything. That probably saved my life. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, especially silent at night, with no visibility of the main road the bus had just driven down. When I heard footsteps behind me, I knew I was right. Someone was following me and he didn't have good intentions. I noticed he wasn't speeding up, so he wasn't trying to catch me immediately, but I had no idea how long it would last. As quietly as I could, I reached for my keys. When I finally got them, I ran, faster than I ever had in my life. Somehow I managed to open and close the door before he reached me. I deactivated the alarm, which confirmed that I was home alone, and then looked through the glass panel in the door. It wasn't a peephole, it was a full window. Anyone outside could see straight in. It was Rob. He stood a few meters away, staring at me with a terrifying expression. He had followed me to my house, probably by car, and he was clearly not there for a friendly visit. I still don't know why I didn't call the police. I was completely paralyzed. We stared at each other for about a minute. When I finally regained control of my body, I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and went back to the door. He was still there, banging on it. For a moment, I was terrified the glass would break, but it didn't. The time I spent pressing against the door, praying it wouldn't give way while he kicked harder and harder, was the longest moment of my life. After maybe 5 minutes, he stopped. He walked around the house, knocking on every shutter, then returned to the door. He looked furious. Then my neighbor's car pulled up and Rob ran away, probably thinking it was my mom coming home. On Twitter, Rob sent me thousands of messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account. I thought the nightmare was over, but soon after, newly created accounts started following me. Their usernames were all a series of numbers with the first letter of his name. Every time I blocked one, another appeared. Eventually, I deleted my account entirely because I couldn't make it stop. They were sending me dozens of insulting DMs, and it was unbearable. Later, I spoke to people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates since I hadn't seen him in days. Not a single person had ever heard of a Rob. He was never a student at my high school. That's why I never saw him anywhere else, and probably why he seemed so much older than he claimed. I never heard from him again, and I still wonder what he wanted and what might have happened that night. This took place a while ago, around 2015, but I'll probably never forget it. I was around 21 at the time and still fairly new to my city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, wasn't in the best place mentally, and didn't know many people in town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating app looking for people to hang out with casually, maybe find a FWB or something. I matched with a 25-year-old guy named Simon. We talked sporadically on the app for a few days. He told me he was in a band and living in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music, just audio on YouTube with a heavily edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments. One of them looked like him. The music was an interesting mix of styles and not really my thing, but whatever. He seemed nice enough. Then he stopped replying for a few days, and I figured that was that and moved on. One day while I was at work, he messaged me again, apologizing for being busy and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He explained that their band manager was providing them the house to live in. Based on the low views on the YouTube video and the fact that I'd only seen one photo of him playing with the band, I figured he was probably exaggerating the whole band manager thing. I assumed it was more likely something like a bar manager giving them discounted rent in exchange for being a house band. I didn't think much of it. Normally, I would have said no to going alone to a barbecue at the house of someone I barely knew. But I was really bored and thought it might help me push through some social anxiety, and maybe even make some female friends, since he made it sound like a big gathering. I put the neighborhood into maps, and it looked like a suburban area with lots of families. I figured being in a yard on a nice summer day wouldn't be too risky, especially since neighbors would likely be outside. Plus, it was only a few train stops from my workplace, and I was off in a few hours. I told him I wasn't completely comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him well, but that I could stop by briefly as long as I didn't have to go inside the house. He said that was totally fine, which made me feel better. I even made sure not to drink anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't risk needing to go inside to use the bathroom, since I was anxious about showing up alone to a party that was supposedly already underway. And because it would be hard to find a specific address from the backyard side, I asked if he could meet me at the train station. He agreed, and I told him when I was leaving work and when my train would arrive. I arrived at the station around 5:30 and looked around but didn't see him. I messaged him and he said he was running late and told me to start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across the large parking lot when I saw him slowly wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes. He was wearing bell-bottoms, which weren't common, especially for men, and his long hair from afar. Up close, though, his face looked pretty different from his photos. He looked older, maybe 5 to 10 years older than the 25-year-old in his pictures. I don't know if the photos were heavily edited or if they were of someone else entirely. This was the first real red flag, but I brushed it off. I told myself he might be self-conscious, or maybe he smoked a lot or didn't wear sunscreen and hadn't taken recent photos. His pictures looked candid, so I figured he wasn't much of a selfie guy. Plus, I was mostly there to make friends anyway, so I tried not to judge him too harshly. He was also clearly already drunk, but since he was supposedly hosting a barbecue, that didn't seem that strange to me. The second red flag came when we reached the front door. I reminded him that I wasn't comfortable going inside, but he assured me we'd just walk through to get to the backyard. The neighborhood wasn't set up in a way where you could walk around the house to the yard. You'd have to backtrack to the main road and go down an alley. I assumed he'd forgotten what I said and didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I went along. Once inside, he immediately closed the door and locked both the deadbolt and the knob behind me. I told myself it wasn't too weird. Some people just automatically lock doors, but it gave me the creeps. Then he said he really wanted to give me a tour of the house. I politely declined and reminded him I was just there for the barbecue. He said he and his bandmates had worked really hard to get the house and that he was proud of it. That made me skeptical, since I'd learned that when people lie, the truth usually starts to slip once you're in their space. Still, I convinced myself I was overreacting. I was already inside, after all. He insisted the tour would be quick. Looking back, it wasn't a smart choice, but at the time I was very good at explaining away red flags. He still came off as a dopey stoner art guy, awkward, insecure, and maybe dishonest, but not dangerous. I figured the worst-case scenario was that he'd get handsy and call me a prude if I rejected him. My self-worth wasn't great at the time, so I went along. The tour was mostly uneventful, except that the decor looked like it had been chosen by a middle-aged Martha Stewart enthusiast, not a group of guys in a band or their supposed manager. I didn't know whether that should make me feel better or worse. It made me think the house probably belonged to someone's mom who was out of town, and that he didn't want to admit he lived there rent-free. Another red flag, but still something I could rationalize at the time. All the bedroom doors were closed. The bathroom was normal, and then he showed me the kitchen. From the window, I could see the backyard, and there was nobody there. No people, no barbecue supplies, no food, nothing. I asked where everyone was and why he'd lied about the barbecue. He said his bandmates were still on tour and running late because of van trouble, but should be back any minute. I asked why he wasn't on tour with them. I don't even remember his answer because it didn't make any sense. At that point, I was out of mental gymnastics. I was genuinely freaked out. I tried to figure out how to get out safely. I hoped that once the tour was over, we could go outside and I could leave. I wasn't comfortable confronting him inside the house. I knew he was lying, but I didn't yet realize how dangerous the situation could become. I pretended to believe him. He offered me a beer and I said no because I had to work in the morning. He cracked one for himself. Then he suggested going downstairs. From the top of the stairs, I could see the basement was dark and creepy, so I refused. I asked again if we could go outside. He said after the tour. I made excuses, spiders, not liking basements, but he got agitated. Eventually, I decided it might be safer to just let him show me quickly and then try to leave. The basement itself wasn't too strange, couch, TV, elliptical. Then I noticed something that gave me chills. The house looked like it was built in the late 80s or 90s, but there was a heavy foam-lined door, like the kind used for cold storage or walk-in freezers, one that only opens from the outside. It looked completely out of place. I refused to go near it. He opened it and said it was their soundproof music studio. Inside were guitars, amps, and mattress toppers on the walls. No drum kit, no recording equipment. He insisted I go inside for a better look and stood outside the door, motioning for me to enter. Every alarm bell in my body was screaming. I turned and ran up the stairs. He followed, asking what was wrong and acting like I was being unreasonable. At that moment, I realized I could actually die there if I wasn't careful. My only goal became getting out of the house. Both the front and back doors were locked. The bathroom had no window. The layout was confusing, and he was much bigger than me. I tried to calm him by pretending I was okay. After some small talk and another beer, he relaxed a bit. I suggested again that we go sit outside. He refused. I said I wanted a cigarette. He said we could smoke inside and pointed to a bowl full of cigarette butts. We sat and smoked. He rolled a joint and insisted I take a puff. I did the smallest one possible and pretended to cough, saying I wasn't used to it. Thankfully, he didn't question it. He then asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I suggested going for a walk or to a park. He didn't like that. He stayed close enough that I could smell beer on his breath. When he grabbed my waist, I backed away and asked about the barbecue food to change the subject. He got angry again and repeated that his bandmates would be home any minute. Then something happened that may have saved me. He went to the fridge for another beer and found it empty. He got even more upset. Desperate, I suggested we go buy more beer for the party. To my relief, he agreed. Walking to the liquor store, I felt safer just being out of the house. Inside the store, he insisted I pick a beer. The cashier was rude and I didn't ask for help. I panicked. I regretted it but didn't think anyone would take me seriously. I had one last idea. I told Simon I needed to buy a toothbrush at the drugstore across the street, implying I might stay over. He agreed but tried to follow me in. I told him you couldn't bring beer into a drugstore. I don't even know if that's true, but he believed it and waited outside. I wandered around the store for at least half an hour. He stood outside the entire time, staring through the window. No phone, no distraction, just watching. I felt trapped. Finally, I waited near the tills until a group of friendly-looking people checked out. I followed them outside and loudly told Simon to leave me alone and go home. He looked at the group, hesitated, and then turned around and left. I ran to the train station, which was thankfully in the opposite direction from his house. I never heard from him again. When I checked the app later, his profile was gone or had blocked me. Years later, I wish I'd reported him. It still bothers me to think he might have tried this again with someone else. But at the time, I was embarrassed, didn't think I'd be taken seriously, and just wanted to move on. All I had was a likely fake name and a vague idea of where the house was. I'll probably never know more than that, and maybe that's for the best.